You simply can't assume that.
Actually, yes, you can.
Hard Talk. Watch on BBC iPlayer.
Hello, this is BBC News Now. The headlines. The UK Home Secretary says she's confident nothing untoward happened in relation to a speeding fine she received last year.
Last summer, I was speeding. I regret that. I paid the fine and I took the points.
The battle for Bakhmut continues. A Russian mercenary group claims its fighters have taken control of the Ukrainian city, but President Zelensky insists that's not the case. BBC News launches BBC Verify. Our new team looks at how Russia is fortifying its defences ahead of an expected Ukrainian counter-offensive. The Spanish football giants Real Madrid lodge a hate crime complaint after their striker Vinicius Jr. was racially abused by opposition fans. Hello and welcome back to BBC News Now. I'm Maryam Moshiri. Well, I want to return to our lead story here in the UK. The Home Secretary says she's confident nothing untoward happened in relation to a speeding fine she received last year. Well, the Home Secretary was asked about the issue whilst on a trip to a children's charity in London a little earlier. Let's have a listen to what she said.
Did you ask civil servants last year to arrange a one-on-one driving awareness course when you were caught for speeding? It's a pretty yes or no question.
Well, first and foremost, I'm focused on the priorities for the British people as Home Secretary. That's cutting serious crime with more police officers. That's standing up for victims of child sexual abuse. It's about stopping the boats. And I'm not going to take a backward step from working on those issues. In relation to your question, last summer, I was speeding. I regret that. I paid the fine and I took the points. But we're focused now on delivering for the British people and working for them.
Did you ask civil servants to put you on a one-on-one speeding course?
In relation to the process, I'm focused on delivering for the British people, do my job as Home Secretary. What I will say is that, in my view, I'm confident that nothing untoward has happened.
Would you welcome an investigation into this? Have you spoken to the Prime Minister? Would you welcome one?
As I said, I'm focused on working as Home Secretary. That's why I'm here. I've met with victims today. I'm making a big announcement today. I'd appreciate the focus on an announcement which is standing up for victims and survivors. In relation to the speeding ticket and my fine and points, I'm very confident nothing
very finally on this, Prime Minister, but this is really important because you've broken rules before. You've had to resign for breaking the ministerial code. You've admitted now to breaking or having a speeding fine. You've accused of breaking the code for a second time. How good a look is it for a senior politician, one of the most senior politicians of the country, to be viewed as a constant rule breaker?
I got a speeding ticket. I paid the fine. I took the points. In my view, nothing untoward has happened. Thank you.
Well, that's Suella Braverman there. Let's cross live now to Westminster and our political correspondent Peter Saul. We were waiting for that, weren't we, Peter, to hear what the Home Secretary had to say. And in amongst all of the talk about doing the job for the British people, she reiterated twice, I speeded, I got a ticket, I paid the fine, I took the points, nothing untoward happened.
I mean, she was choosing her words very, very carefully indeed there, wasn't she? And she repeatedly really refused to engage with the central allegation here that she arranged this or tried to get civil servants to arrange a private one-on-one speed awareness course. The suggestions over the weekend was one that she wanted to do that because she was worried that she might get recognised, too, that there wouldn't be enough room because she has to have close protection around her. Ultimately, as she said there, she did just accept that she was going to have to pay the fine and take the points on her licence. But it has raised these questions about whether or not she's broken the rule book for ministers, the ministerial code, by putting those civil servants in a very difficult position. And this morning, we've also learnt from the Prime Minister's official spokesperson that Rishi Sunak has now spoken to his ethics advisor, Sir Laurie Magnus, about this. It's not clear whether an investigation will be launched. The line that we're being given is that the Prime Minister is still gathering information on this, but you certainly haven't heard the end of this story. In a couple of hours' time, the Home Secretary will have to appear in the House of Commons, where she'll come under even closer scrutiny. It's the regular departmental questions that she faces as Home Secretary, but you'd imagine there'll be an awful lot of opposition MPs trying to kind of nail her down on what actually happened here. And as was pointed out in the interview here, she's someone who's got a bit of a marked card in a way anyway, having broken the ministerial code, admitting breaking the ministerial code in the past by using private email for public government information, and now, though, she insisting as regards these allegations, she believes nothing untoward has happened.
And Peter, let's talk about other elements of this, because, of course, as you mentioned, it's up to the ethics advisor who will advise the Prime Minister as to whether or not this needs to be moved forward. But there was also talk in some of the papers, weren't there, about some of her staff talking to journalists, reporting back to journalists who asked a question about whether or not there was a speeding fine issued. And apparently, allegedly, these staff told a certain newspaper that there was no speeding fine. Is that correct? I mean, that's a story that I've been looking at over the last day or so. Yeah,
we don't know the exact details of what exactly has happened here. Certainly, you cannot remove the politics from this. And there are allies of Suella Braverman who've suggested that this is an attempt by civil servants to smear the Home Secretary. She is a divisive figure. She's putting through some pretty divisive measures to deal with the number of people coming over to the UK on small boats across the English Channel. As I say, you know, she's done things in the past which some people might view her as perhaps not being best suited to hold such a high office, but equally she is very well liked within the Conservative Party, and she's an important figure to have around the table for Rishi Sunak because she represents the right of the party. Just last week, she was giving an interview here in Westminster at a grassroots Conservative conference called the National Conservatism Conference, where, you know, she was speaking again about immigration. Some people saw that as a potential pitch to be Conservative leader should they lose the next general election. We may be getting a little bit ahead of ourselves on that here, but it may well be the case there are those who are trying to discredit the Home Secretary at the moment. That's certainly what people close to her believe at the moment anyway.
Peter, stay there for a second or two. I want to run some pictures that are coming to us here at the BBC of the Home Secretary arriving at Downing Street. Let's have a listen.
Are you going to resign, Home Secretary? Did you break the ministerial code?
What did she say there?
Do you know what?
I couldn't hear her, Peter.
I couldn't hear her, I'm afraid, no. But
I'm going to stop the boats, she said. I'm being told by Anna, our editor, in my ear. I'm going to stop the boats.
Yeah, I mean, obviously
not really relevant, is it? If you kind of boil it down.
No, not particularly relevant to what we're talking about today. That is for sure. Now, there are other ministers turning up to Number 10 today too, so perhaps this isn't her turning up for a one-to-one with Rishi Sunak about these allegations to do with the speed awareness course. But you know, at the daily briefing for Westminster journalists, the Prime Minister's spokesperson was repeatedly asked whether Rishi Sunak had actually spoken to Suella Braverman since he arrived back into the UK after the G7 summit in Japan, and they just wouldn't say whether that conversation had happened. But you'd imagine it would do between now and that appearance in the House of Commons. She needs to, I suppose, get her story right. Maybe the boats were speeding, Peter. Yeah, but say that again. Then maybe the boats were speeding.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm just wondering where the connection is. But anyway, there you go. Peter Saul, thank you very much indeed, as always, from Westminster. And he'll be back if there's any update on that story. But let's take you now to another breaking news story this hour. That Spanish football club Real Madrid has lodged a hate crime complaint with Spanish prosecutors after the Brazil international Vinicius Jr. was subjected to racist chants during Real Madrid's match at Valencia. The Brazilian president, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, has urged the sports authorities in Spain and other European countries to act decisively to prevent the spread of fascism and racism in football grounds. Well, Pierre-Antoine Denis is in the newsroom with the very latest.
It is, without a doubt, the biggest story coming out of football over the weekend. Vinicius Jr. is one of the most exciting talent in world football at the moment, once again victim of racist abuse. It all started at the 73rd minute in the game between Real Madrid and Valencia. Vinicius Jr. was seen pointing a fan in the stands before engaging with him, as well as his Real Madrid teammates. He also informed the referee about the incident, which automatically triggers the racism protocol coordinated by the UEFA, the Europe's governing body. It implies a public announcement from the speakers saying that fans must stop immediately to chant racist abuse, and it also halts the game until further notice, which means that the players can decide whether or not they want to start the game again. The game did start again, and in the last minute of it, Vinicius Jr. was sent off for a completely different incident. words. This triggered Carlo Ancelotti, that made his feelings clear in the press conference after match.
When they showed him the red card, the whole stadium was shouting abuses at him. There's not much to say. I am very upset. I've never experienced anything like it. Not like that. I never thought I'd have to consider taking a player off because he's being abused. He's a young lad, Vinicius, who loves playing football, but in those conditions, it's so difficult.
Valencia Football Club condemned the event, but also condemned Carlo Ancelotti's words that the whole stadium was shouting abuses at Vinicius. This is not enough for the player himself, who said on his social media, racism has won. A league that once belonged to Messi, Ronaldo, Ronaldinho and others now belong to racists. And in fact, Vinicius Jr. is no stranger to racist abuse, because 10 instances of racist abuse towards Vinicius have been recorded by the La Liga itself since 2021. La Liga said that they can't prosecute and punish clubs or fans for racist events. All they can say and do is forward the claim and the report to a regional court to decide whether or not it is a hate crime. Now, Vinicius received messages of support from across world football, including Kylian Mbappe, Rio Ferdinand or Portuguese international Rafael Leao, saying, when will this stop?
That's Pierre-Antoine Denis, our reporter in the newsroom. I want to speak now to Thiago Alcantara, who's a Brazilian sports journalist based in Barcelona. Thiago, thanks so much for joining us. Tell me a little bit about how this story is playing out in the media in Spain.
Hi, Maryam. Thanks for having me. Here in Spain, it's been like the main topic in the press since yesterday. It's been a while, and I was hearing the reports before. It's been like 1 year and a half, maybe, that Vinicius has been suffering with this kind of situations in stadia. But now I think the situation is different, because there are more people involved. Brazilian government got involved. Brazilian ministries of government also published doing their support to him. And here in Spain, I think for the first time, maybe, we start to see the discussion finally getting on the main subject of it, which is racism, racial offense to a player that is doing his job in a field. Before that, most of people, they were discussing if Vinicius' style of playing was provocative, if his works ethics were provocative, or were trying to complicate the matches. But now, finally, I think we're hearing for the first time some people, or part of the media, saying the words racism, racial abuse, which I think can be the first step towards a solution or a punishment from the league and from the Spanish Federation in this case.
It seems shocking that this is a first step, given this has been going on for so long. Why has it taken so long for people to sit up and take notice of this?
It's a very tricky question. It's very complicated to find an answer to it, because usually when you get this kind of episodes, this kind of racial offenses in a football match, you get punished. I mean, the clubs get punished. In Brazil, for example, where I came from and where I have the background to talk about, the Brazilian Confederation of Football Confederation, they created a set of rules in which if a club, if the fans of a club, supporters of a club, do something similar to what the Valencia supporters did yesterday, the club will be punished. The club will maybe be severely punished. But in Spain, this never happened. This is still in the first steps, in the beginning of this process. I think now that Real Madrid entered with a complaint to the Spanish prosecutors,
yes,
this might speed up a little bit. This might be a beginning of a change.
OK, Thiago, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for that. Thank you once again to you. Now, evidence has emerged that UK and US regulators were informed of an intentional, international, state-led drive to manipulate interest rates in the 2008 financial crisis, but covered it up. This morning, the Times newspaper and the BBC published quotes from a previously secret interview with the Barclays cash trader, who gave evidence of moves by central banks and the UK government to push artificially down the benchmark interest rates, LIBOR and Euribor. That evidence was withheld from Parliament and from jurors in criminal trials for traders manipulating interest rates Regulators say they've met their disclosure obligations. Well, our economics correspondent Andy Verity has led the investigation and joins me now. And Andy, first of all, remind us what LIBOR and Euribor actually are.
Well, those obscure-sounding acronyms are actually the thing that determines most of all the interest rates you pay on your loans or your mortgage. You hear about the central bank's official rates, we report them all the time, but it's actually the cost to the banks of getting hold of cash on international money markets that really determines the interest rates you pay. And LIBOR and Euribor track that, a bit like the way the FTSE 100 tracks the prices of shares. Now, of course, banks in the last 10 years have paid fines of $9 billion for manipulating LIBOR and Euribor, and we've been told it's all about traders. 37 traders were prosecuted for allegedly manipulating LIBOR and Euribor, although the US courts have now decided what they were doing wasn't a crime at all. Meanwhile, while they were being tried, a whole other story was being kept quiet about how central banks and the UK government, among others, were actually pushing LIBOR down in the middle of the financial crisis. I've come across lots of evidence of this, including an audio recording we discovered a while ago between a Barclays cash trader, Peter Johnson, who was ordered by a senior Barclays executive, Mark Dearlove, to push his LIBORs lower on instructions from above. And we weren't told about this when Parliament inquired into it. The jurors weren't told about it in the criminal trials. And when you listen to it, you can guess why.
The bottom line is you're going to absolutely hate this, and I've spoken to Spence about it as well, but we've had some very serious pressure from the UK government and the Bank of England about pushing our LIBORs lower.
Can I have advising from them?
BJ, I'm on your side 100%. These guys don't see it. They're bent out of shape. They're calling everybody from Diamond to Varley to
Well, Collins has told us he's going to be getting a call from the ECB telling him to put his LIBORs lower as well.
Well, just to explain, I mean, just because we're short for time, just off the back of that, we also heard, we found out about an interview that Peter Johnson gave to all the regulators and prosecutors, where he talked about that conversation and about other evidence, including published data on LIBOR and Euribor submissions, which suggests the Banque de France was ordering French banks to put it down, and also interventions by the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. But that was never put in their published statements fining banks.
OK, Andy Verity, thank you so much for that. Around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News.
From the police to security to apprentice bricklayer, Jennifer is happy with her new career choice.
I always wanted to learn a trade, so for me, if I was going to do one, it would be one where I can understand how to build a house.
100 apprentices a year will come through this new hub near Cambridge and train in 18 months, a year quicker than usual.
You start as a bricklayer, once you're qualified, you can be earning 40,000 or even 50,000 a year as a bricklayer.
Last year, there were just over 72,000 bricklayers working across the country. But by 2027, that number's actually projected to fall slightly. All at a time when all major political parties say they want more new homes to be built. The government recently added bricklayers to a list that should make it easier for overseas brickies to get a visa. But it's home-trained workers from places like this that's expected to make the biggest difference.
You're live with BBC News Now. I'm Maryam Moshiri. At least 20 children have died in a major fire at a school in Guyana. It broke out just before midnight at the school in Madia, engulfing the dormitory and trapping students inside. Firefighters struggled to control the flames. An emergency response has been set up in the capital, Georgetown, to treat critically injured survivors. Guyana is located between Venezuela and Suriname on the northern coast of South America. Let's take you now to the general election in Greece. Now, the governing New Democracy Party has achieved a resounding victory, which the party's leader, Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis, has called a political earthquake. He described his party's 41% share of the vote as a mandate to govern for 4 more years. But with almost all the votes counted, the centre-right party looks set to fall short of an absolute majority. Well, Nick Beak has more from Athens.
This morning, Prime Minister Mitsotakis is in a strong position because it was always going to be very difficult for him to secure an outright majority in this vote because of the changes to the electoral system that he inherited. But he has done much better than the pollsters here in Greece had predicted. They were talking about a 6 percentage point lead over a series of the left-wing opposition. As it turns out, it was more than 20%. So they really underestimated the level of support for him. In terms of what happens today, that the post-vote procedure kicks in, really. So the official results will be taken to the presidential mansion. The Greek president, she will then invite Prime Minister Mitsotakis to go into coalition talks to try and form an administration. But from his point of view, for the Prime Minister, he's not going to want to do that because he's seen this share of the vote that he's got top 40%. And so what everyone expects here is that there will be another general election in Greece, probably in about a month's time. And what will happen there, crucially, is that a new system of voting, or certainly the electoral system, comes in. And as part of this, if you top the polls as the leading party, you get these bonus votes. So Prime Minister Mitsotakis will think that he's got a better chance to secure that outright majority.
Tributes are being paid to the TV presenter Philip Schofield, who's quit ITV's This Morning programme with immediate effect after 2 decades on the talk show. Fellow presenters Alison Hammond and Dermot O'Leary, who presented the programme this morning, hailed him as one of the best live TV broadcasters this country has ever had. Well, let's cross live now to our entertainment reporter Stephen McIntosh to tell us more. And Stephen, give us a bit of an update as to what this story means, particularly for viewers around the world who may not understand who Philip Schofield is and why he matters to us.
Well, Philip Schofield has presented This Morning on ITV for 21 years, since 2002, so he has been really a stalwart of that programme for 2 decades. Holly Willoughby joined him in 2009, and together they are seen as a really popular presenting pair in this country, or they have been until recently. They have great chemistry together, and they've made the show a success. It's a real kind of pillar of that ITV daytime schedule. Now, in the last few weeks, there has been reports of a rift between the two presenters, and this all came to a head on Saturday when Philip Schofield released a statement saying that he was stepping down from the programme with immediate effect. So, as you say, this morning the cover presenters Alison Hammond and Dermot O'Leary have been on the sofa instead. Those two only present the show on Fridays, but they're they've been brought in to steady the ship, as it were. And Alison Hammond, as you say, opened the show by describing Philip Schofield as one of the best live broadcasters this country has ever had, and she said that everyone on the ITV programme wished him all the best for the future. And Dermot O'Leary also said that as a show, everyone on the production team and at the channel wanted to wish him all the best and thank him as well for making the show into what it has been, which is a huge success for the last 21 years. OK, Stephen, thank you very much indeed. Here in the UK, King Charles will today attend the annual Chelsea Flower Show in London. Along with Queen Camilla, the King will visit a number of gardens, including one in tribute to his late mother. Well, let's cross live now to the Chelsea Flower Show and the BBC's Charlotte Gallagher, who is there for us. Charlotte, lucky you, what a lovely day to be out there.
I really do have the best job today here at Chelsea Show. There are so many gorgeous gardens, gorgeous plants, and I'm on one of the show gardens, one of the largest scale gardens, and it's for the Centre for Mental Health. And if you look behind me, there's a mushroom den. That sci-fi box with the steam coming out, they're growing mushrooms, there's a water feature. It's so creative and it feels really wild as well. And I'm joined by 2 of the designers here, Steve Williams, John Davis, and Andy Bell from the Centre of Mental Health. What was your inspiration for this? Because there's so much going on.
Yeah, there's a lot going on here. There's a lot of layers to it. But overall, this is going to be in Markfield Park, Tottenham. The legacy is going there, and it's all about the urban environment and how we can wild it up and a community to steward.
And Andy, what did you think when you saw this garden for the first time?
We were absolutely thrilled for the sight of what we could be involved in, the opportunity to be part of something that would really help to change the debate on mental health and well-being, to think about healing spaces, and the opportunity to be part of this today, to bring our charity and our message to Chelsea Flower Show is fantastic.
And it's so important for mental health, isn't it? Plants, nature, and this feels really peaceful. Even though we're in the middle of Chelsea Flower Show, there's loads going on, it's quite serene.
Yeah, that's it. It's how we create this authentic nature connection in urban spaces, where it's got to be something deeper than just walking through a park with cut grass and trees. There's a deeper connection we're all missing. That's why it's brilliant working with the Centre for Mental Health. So in the legacy, we'll be collecting research, you have evidence-based research to hopefully create the blueprint of how we can change our urban spaces nationwide.
And this is incredible because people might not realise that when you get here, there is nothing here. And you have to build this in just a few weeks. How's it been? Because there's been torrential rain and incredibly hot days.
It's been 2.5 weeks of pure intensity. And the idea is that a lot of this is about wildflowers and weeds and how that can encroach. So the detailing is so important, and to get it looking legitimate was really tough. But I think we did a decent job.
I think you've done a very decent job. And you said you managed to have your first drink as well today to celebrate.
Literally just starting when you jumped on us, so we're looking to get back to it after this.
I didn't quite jump on them. I want to make that clear. And it's really nice that this is going somewhere else. It's going to have another life.
Yeah, that's right. It's got a real legacy. This is a community garden for a local area which will be owned by the people there, and as the guys have said, we want this to be something that lots of people do. There's a huge potential for community gardens across the country to be part of a movement for better mental health for everyone.
Thank you so much. And all these gardens here at Chelsea Flower Show are going to have on a second life. They're not going to be broken apart. They're going to go to different gardens, hospitals, and lots of people will be able to enjoy them in the future.
Charlotte, thank you very much indeed. Charlotte Gallagher there, enjoying the blooms and the blossoms at the Chelsea Flower Show. Stay with us on the BBC. Plenty more to come on BBC News Now from me.
Hello there. This week may not, technically speaking, bring us a heat wave. However, it is going to feel warm, where you get to see some sunshine, and it is going to be largely dry. But it certainly hasn't been wall-to-wall sunshine everywhere so far today. This was Suffolk earlier on, with quite a lot of cloud in the sky. In fact, that cloud across some central and eastern parts of England has been producing the odd spot of drizzle. There should be a bit more brightness here towards the end of the day. We've also got this stripe of cloud pushing southwards across southern Scotland, northern England. That could generate the odd shower. The highest temperatures across parts of the West Midlands, southeast Wales and southwest England, up to 22 or 23 degrees. Tonight it will be predominantly dry with clear spells and variable amounts of cloud, perhaps more generally cloudy weather rolling into Northern Ireland and Western Scotland later in the night. A little bit chilly for some of us, 1 or 2 places down to around 4 or 5 degrees. But the weather this week dominated by this big egg-shaped area of high pressure extending in from the Atlantic. That's going to keep things largely dry. The wind's coming in around the top of that area of high pressure. Not a particularly warm wind direction, but not feeling too bad. Where you get some sunshine, there will be some spells of sunshine tomorrow. Perhaps the best of that across England and Wales. A bit more cloud for Northern Ireland and Scotland, maybe just squeezing out the odd spot of drizzle in places. Now, temperatures just a touch down on today's values for many of us, but regardless of the temperatures, if you have sunshine overhead, UV levels moderate or high, so do protect yourself if you're out for any length of time. Now into Wednesday, we will see a frontal system pushing southwards across Scotland and Northern Ireland. A very weak affair, little bit of rain. Certainly an area of clouds. To the south of that, some sunny spells for England and Wales, and a slightly warmer day again, highs of around 20, 21 degrees. Always a little bit cooler across the northwest of Scotland. Now later in the week, our area of high pressure is expected to move eastwards. That will keep things largely dry. Depending on the exact shape of this high, the exact positioning of the high, well, we may start to tap into some slightly warmer air from the southeast. That is open to question, but there are signs that through the end of the week and into the weekend, it could turn a little bit warmer for some of us. Not a heat wave, but feeling pleasant in the sunshine.
I just felt this tightening in my stomach. Where do I need to go? How can I get there?
Rescuers are using their bare hands to search desperately for survivors.
In a lot of the stories that we tell, they can be so bleak. People here wonder if they can ever rebuild. You need to show some hope.
So this is what an exodus looks like. My coping mechanism at the time was to not think further than an hour ahead.
My job is investigating bad stuff that's on social media. I know by doing this interview and sharing it, I'll probably get more online abuse. My job is to expose how people are targeted because I'm a reporter who can do that.
At the end of the day, a proclamation of a new king is actually the moment to be looking forward. And that tempered the way that I covered the story.
Everyone ready for that proclamation of a new king.
Hip, hip! Behind
behind the stories. Watch on BBC iPlayer.
Today at 1, the Home Secretary denies any wrongdoing following controversy over her handling of a speeding offence.
And he regrets, Home Secretary.
Suella Braverman is alleged to have sought advice from civil servants about organising a private speed awareness course instead of attending a public session.
I got a speeding ticket, I paid the fine, I took the points. In my view, nothing untoward has happened. Thank you.
The rules say civil servants aren't allowed to get involved in the private affairs of ministers. We'll have the very latest from Westminster. Also on the programme, Sir Keir Starmer outlines his plans to reform the NHS with new targets, cutting deaths from heart disease, strokes and suicide. The BBC has a new team called BBC Verify, forensically checking data and information. Today, just how is Russia preparing for a Ukrainian counter-offensive? And the Chelsea Flower Show opens. This year, sustainability and diversity are two of the key themes.
Coming up in the sport on BBC News, 1 down, 2 to go. Pep Guardiola says to be considered one of the greatest teams, his Manchester City side have to become European champions.
Good afternoon and welcome to the BBC News at 1. The Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, says she's confident nothing untoward has happened following controversy over her handling of speeding offence last summer. Now, she refused to be drawn on whether she instructed civil servants to arrange a one-on-one driving awareness course instead of attending a public session. Opposition parties say she should quit if she's found to have breached the ministerial code, because the rules say civil servants shouldn't get involved in the private affairs of ministers. Rishi Sunak has been meeting his ethics advisor to decide what happens next. Here's our political correspondent, Ian Watson, with the very latest from Westminster.
And he regrets, Home Secretary. Are you subject to different laws than the rest of us, Home Secretary?
The Home Secretary wasn't behind the wheel of her ministerial car today, possibly just as well. She was fined for speeding last year and got points in her licence, though that in itself wouldn't cost her her job. But as an alternative to a fine, she first of all had been offered the option of attending a speed awareness course. She'd wanted a one-to-one session without other members of the public present. That proved not to be possible. But at issue is whether she'd asked civil servants to try to arrange this, and in doing so broke the ministerial code. Today she made it clear she felt she'd done nothing wrong.
In my view, I'm confident that nothing untoward has happened. Last summer, I was speeding. I regret that. I paid the fine and I took the points.
But a former senior civil servant thinks she could have a case to answer.
The code is very clear. Ministers must ensure that no conflict arises or appears to arise between their public duties and their private interests. Even asking the question of a civil servant as to how she might go on one of these courses puts them in an impossible position.
Those close to the Home Secretary says she only asked civil servants for advice. She didn't improperly instruct them to do anything on her behalf. But at the end of the G7 summit in Japan, the Prime Minister's frustration was clear.
Do you have full confidence in Suella Braverman?
Did you have any questions about the summit?
Downing Street subsequently clarified that he did have confidence in the Home Secretary. Nonetheless, he's now had a conversation with his advisor on ministerial standards and is said to be gathering further information. Opposition parties are calling for an urgent inquiry into Suella Braverman's conduct.
The Prime Minister did stand outside Downing Street when he became Prime Minister, say that he was going to bring about change, much needed change, I might say, under this government, and have accountability, honesty and transparency. And I think that an investigation obviously comes first.
In the past hour, the Home Secretary went into Downing Street.
Are you going to resign, Home Secretary?
She suggested she was discussing how to stop the boats, not whether her own political career would be brought to a halt. But she's not home and dry yet.
Indeed, Ian, because the Prime Minister has met his ethics advisor. What happens now?
Yeah, well, as far as I'm aware, Clive, Suella Braverman's still inside Downing Street. As you heard, she seemed to be indicating she was there to discuss